Welcome back to Between Two Bots. I'm your co-host, Dan Turchin, CEO of People Rain. I'm joined by Dr. Mark von Rijmenam, author, futurist, and entrepreneur. This is the podcast where we discuss the future of humanity, society, and government as seen through the lens of your data, your privacy, and the ethics of AI. This is a conversation we need to be having now. Every week, we're testing the boundaries between AI, ethics, data, and ways humans coexist with machines. Tune in each week to learn from the experts who are on the front lines defining how we'll work and live for the next century. If you enjoy these discussions, please like, share, and comment in your favorite podcast app. Now, we sit today really at the confluence of what I'd call three trends. More automated decisions are being made on our behalf. They have greater impact on our lives, and frustratingly, there's less transparency than ever about what goes into the making of those decisions. Today, we're lucky to have one of the most visible experts around on the subjects of AI, data, the future of work, and global supply chains, who's going to help us explore these complicated topics. Dr. Mark, maybe you'd like to introduce our guest, and we'll start the discussion.
Sounds good. Thank you, Dan. It's great to be back in our podcast, trying to explore the world of AI ethics. On today's show, we have Dr. Marcell Vollmer. He's a partner and director at the global BCG consultancy firm, and he advises C-level executives and executive teams on the full range of digital transformation, innovation, new business models, restructuring, and reorganization, with a focus indeed on procurement, supply chain, and operations globally. So it's glad to have you in the show, Marcell.
Thanks for having me, Dan and Mark. I appreciate the introduction, and hello, everyone.
Great. So as always, we started the podcast with three articles that we want to share with our guest about what happened in the world of AI ethics. And I think we found some great articles this time. And I would like to kick it off with the first article, which is an article which was published on Wire.com a few days ago, and which is all about that Americans need a Bill of Rights for an AI-powered world. And what the article discusses is that we have large amounts of data being gathered by companies around the world, and they use AI to interpret this data, resulting in all kinds of new tools and technologies such as facial recognitions to unlock our smartphones, algorithms that identify cancer in patients, and many more other opportunities. But there's a downside to these problems, as the article describes, because with these new tools, we also have some serious problems because machines they learn from the data that we feed them, and if this data is not correct, then the AI consequently will also be not correct. And biased data, that's what we're talking about, can result in all kinds of problems. At the same time, these technologies also raise questions about privacy and transparencies, and there's the problem that AI can be abused as well. So therefore, the article describes how in America they want to create a Bill of Rights for data to clarify the rights and freedoms that we expect from these data-driven technologies, and that they want to respect them as well. So the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy is creating this Bill of Rights with the input from the public. So, Marcell, what do you think about such a Bill of Rights around data, and what would be some of the key rights embedded in such a bill if it were up to you?
Thanks, Mark. That's a great question, and I think we definitely need regulation for artificial intelligence and machine learning. Let's be a little bit careful about the term intelligence, because if you really think, and lots of people mix it sometimes, that intelligence is like the human intelligence, that we can react and adapt to different situations differently, depending also on our moral compass, what we have. This is not all the time working in that way what machines can do, because we are still talking about algorithms, very well programmed algorithms, also algorithms which can go to the next level with machine learning capabilities. But basically what we see right now, when we look in the magnitude of artificial intelligence, machine learning applications and development, what's happening right now, we see that basically everyone is experimenting, which is a good thing because you need data, you need to start to test something. But then when it comes really to the practical use of it, like in autonomous vehicles, self-driving cars, we figure out we need certain regulations for that. So therefore, I believe that the number one priority right now is what is allowed to test, what can we do to really figure out what are the capabilities of software today, and on the other side also to give a certain space in different countries, like Elon Musk with the self-driving capabilities is doing that, but also the other automotive companies right now. What is it what they are allowed to do, and what is it where probably we need to say that, hey, that's a little bit too early to really take decisions to that level. So therefore I believe that a regulatory framework is needed, but not a framework in a way that we have a law and we know that this is decided and then it might stay for 10, 20, whatever years. It might be that we say there is a regulation based on what we know today. We are using that, but we might to need to adapt it because technology is evolving fast. So therefore the regulation needs also to evolve. And this is exactly where I believe we are currently heading, and what might help to get the benefits of disruptive technologies like AI, machine learning, and on the other side also providing a framework that we will benefit and see that these technologies can be used in our daily life in the future.
Second article builds on that same set of themes, and it was published in Nature, and it's a book review of someone who's almost a neighbor of yours. Helga Nowotny is based in Vienna. She's a professor and recently published "In AI We Trust: Power, Illusion, and Control of Predictive Algorithms." And this is a bit of I don't know if I'd say cynical, but maybe uh, a book that asks some important questions. So, should we have blind faith in the power of AI, or should we be allowed to question that because AI algorithms were developed by humans and fed data generated by humans, they are fallible like humans? And it's an interesting exploration of as a society, the boundaries that we should have with automated decisions. What are your thoughts about how much it's okay to be questioning the kind of inherent complications involved in the algorithms and the data behind the automated decisions?
I think we are currently in a phase that we still experiment and try to figure out what are really the capabilities. On the one side, we need to admit that our brains, human brains, have limitations. When you look at the magnitude of information in the world out, the data getting created every day, every hour, every second, it is not possible for any human being basically to process all the information. So therefore, machines are helpful. AI, machine learning can definitely be very beneficial, helping us to digest and package information that we really can make it usable for our daily life, for our decisions, what we take. On the other side, I think we need also to discuss trust in general. Whom and what machine can we really trust? Of course, we trust our cars since more than a century by knowing, hey, it works. But sometimes it can also fail. So can machines fail. So can robots fail. So can also an algorithm fail. And we see that. There are sometimes hiccups in code of large software firms. Think about the shutdown of Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, beginning of this week, where we have seen what can happen and whatever the technical situation was. But basically, we need to be clear about there are certain things which might fail today, and therefore we need also to have the right mechanisms in place that we have, let's say, a corrective in it, like a judge, like someone really who oversees and is looking into that, to not entirely trust the machines until we know the machine is working correctly. And if we figure that out, I think it's a learning curve. At the beginning, did we really trust our computers, what we had. I remember my 286 when I started with, hey, I was really not sure. I put in some code, I tried to experiment, and wow, suddenly it worked. In the meantime, I don't question Windows or Google or any of the applications what I'm using, but here it comes. I mentioned Google. What are the search results really based on? And when you look also what machines are doing, when we have seen also the test which artificial intelligence did, it can easily lead also to a misperception of using only certain information fitting into one bucket, into one cluster. Who is helping with that to get out basically of, let's say, a negative cycle of information getting processed? And this is really where I believe that technology is a great thing. And with more than 14 years at SAP, 1 year at Celonis, working with process analytics, process mining, I'm definitely someone who sees the positive side of the technology. But I think we need also to have a certain way in looking at it from the outside with our human brains, and also link it to the moral compass what we have. And I think this is currently the challenge what we all need to discuss, and therefore it's great having a podcast like this one, but also having a broader discussion what we see globally, regulations, politics, science, to really bring the best out of it, and also help the business to evolve and come up with new business models in the future.
Well, I think that you strike a good point there, because I think the trust that we have in technology, and especially new technology, is crucial if we are willing to adopt it, and use it. And so, and the final article, which appeared in Sifted this week, is sort of similar, is related to that, because it says that the title is, Europe wants to champion human rights, so why doesn't it police biased AI in recruiting? And the article goes that we in the EU and EU policymakers, we are so fond of our privacy, and which I think is a good thing. And they want to chart a third way for AI regulation, one that respects human rights like privacy. And according to the article, proposed AI regulation and regulators at all levels of the government in the EU are ignoring one key factor, and that's race. And so, if we look at race, what the article states is that no one should be denied an equal opportunity to employment. And unfortunately, with AI becoming more and more involved in the recruitment process, it is possible that, according to the author, biased data will have a negative effect on some people from a certain race. And of course, the more data that we use for our AI, and the more chance that these AI are biased and are actually negatively affecting people, as was clearly detailed by the well-known book "Weapons of Math Destruction" by Katie O'Neill. Marcell, what is your vision on how we should get rid of this bias in AI tools that we are developing?
I think, Mark, that's an excellent question, and probably that's one thing. If I could answer this question and would have the solution on that, probably I would not be sitting here. I might be now out and develop the next multi-billion-dollar startup. No, just kidding. And basically, coming to the point, it's really something we need to think about. There is bias in the world because simply it depends already on the set of data what you use. Look, for example, also on the differences. What is allowed in the world? When you look on the one side in China, 1.4 billion population, and they have a very open approach in really getting all the data, even using data for social scoring. That basically, if you cross a road and the traffic light is red, basically you might get identified, and basically it impacts negatively your social score. On the other side, you can also do positive things, which works on the positive side, but also might have certain results behind that you are not allowed to buy plane tickets anymore or train tickets, that you are basically also having less access. In Europe, and I'm a German, as you can hear from my strong accent, even 3 years in the United States didn't help to get rid of that. Sorry for that. But basically, there is a different understanding of data privacy, data protection, GDPR, very well known. 2018, we started with that, looking really into all the data and the data privacy topic. I think what we need to do is to balance really getting on the one side and not necessarily limiting what we can get access and what we can do with information. But on the other side, also looking into that, what do we really want? And if we see that racism is happening, I'm pretty sure that we are all in agreement we don't want to have racism in our technology. So therefore, we need to see what is it, why is it, what is really the imbalance we might see. And then this is also where I really talk about intelligence. It is not the artificial intelligence based on algorithm, which might lead to a conclusion we don't want to have, that a criminal looks in general like this, having a certain profile and criteria. We need to see that, hey, all humans are equal, and basically we have a fair system basically helping us to leverage and use the technology, but not basically allowing the bias. And I think this is exactly what only we as humans can define, what also is based on our foundation of values, what we have. And this is what we need to bring into the machines if we want to work and want to have these machines working for us. Overall, let me conclude by that. I think the good thing about the technology and using artificial intelligence, robotics, and all the emerging technologies. I don't want to use all the buzzwords, but you might know the study from 2020 from the World Economic Forum. The good thing is that overall, jobs get lost by the technology. But on the other side, it's also a very positive thing, seeing that I think it was 85 million jobs might be negatively impacted, might be replaced by emerging technologies. On the other side, 97 million jobs getting created. And this is really showing also the power what it has. So, and this shows there's a positive side, there's an element in, we need to see that we found it on the right values we want to establish using these technologies. But on the other side, we need also be open for change, because the change will come and the technology will drive this in the future.
Marcell, we're going to move past the article review, and now we have a couple questions we'd like to address with you. And let me first say that I have spent time in Germany, and your English is far better than my German. So it's very impressive, in fact.
Thanks,
Now,
Dan. Appreciate it.
you mentioned you had a good run at SAP, at Celonis, now you're at BCG. You've had an opportunity to speak with a lot of very progressive organizations. One of the conversations we have on this podcast is about the level of maturity that most corporations have with respect to this dialogue about the ethics of AI. Can you share a summary of to what extent is this a topic that large enterprises globally are starting to be comfortable having a dialogue around?
I think this is definitely something in every single discussion I have. Is a topic about using emerging disruptive technologies, using artificial intelligence, machine learning is coming up. Why? Because it's embedded in everything. Even if you use our smartphone only for one day, if we use Google, basically we see already the benefits, what the technology does. And therefore, it is not a big surprise that companies currently thinking about what are the business models of the future, business model innovations. What is it, how I can do on a more basic side? And you mentioned at the introduction that I'm focusing on digital transformation for companies, main focus procurement as integrated part of supply chain management. And this really shows also, can we automate more? Can we, for example, also use information to get insights? We have seen what it can cause if an area like the Wuhan city in the Hubei area in China has a lockdown. How many suppliers are impacted by that? We need to get access of information. We need to process that. Or if a ship like the Evergreen got stuck in the Suez Canal, this is definitely something also where we need to process data, but it is not just processing data. The descriptive data is also what does it mean. So predictive analytics derived from that, and ideally in the future to prescribe prescriptive guidance to help the people. Okay, if now this area gets shut down, these suppliers are impacted, it's not tier one, tier two suppliers, this is what you now can do for risk mitigation. And this is basically part of every discussion what I see on the automation, on using market insights, using very actual information about what's happening out there in the world, especially when it comes also to price development. We see right now how crazy some prices are going up. Just one example, a container from Europe to Asia, it costed 2019 about $2,000. When you now wanna rent a container to ship whatever you like to fit into, basically it costs 20,000 bucks. So this is 10x of what we talk about. How can you really now define the right strategies? You need to leverage and need to base it on data and insights what you get.
Now, what I say is, I think it's very interesting to see that if we are able to understand how the AI is being created, then we will also be able to better mitigate the risks that are involved with AI, undoubtedly, unfortunately. And you are very active on LinkedIn, and to all our listeners, I can definitely recommend following Marcel on LinkedIn to read his,
Thank you.
his posts and his articles that he shares. And I recently saw an article or a post from you that everyone wants to use AI, but nobody really wants to learn the tools to build AI correctly. And I think that's the problem, because if we can't build, if we don't master the tools to build AI correctly, we're also not able to mitigate the risk that come with AI. How do you think we can mitigate these risks that come with AI, and what should we do, and what should we advise organizations who are starting with AI to embed within their processes to make sure that the AI that they are developing is beneficial to their employees and their customers and to society?
Mark, let me start with the second question first about what do we recommend companies. I'm a very pragmatic guy. I learned in my more than 3 decades now, I'm in business, that basically think always about what is the real value, what is the use case, the business case you can come up with. Because if you just get lost by the buzzwords out there, and probably you know the Gartner hype cycle, basically, oh wow, this is now this buzzword. It was blockchain, it was artificial intelligence, it was smart cities, IoT, and so on. There's a certain period in time, and everyone is talking about that, but basically at the end, and this is also where I get grounded with lots of conversation with executives. What is really the value? Why should we do that? What is really the benefit? It is not just playing around with technology. Of course, you need to do that. You need also um, to be bold and test something out. Otherwise, you're not coming up with something like this, a new smartphone, for example, or a self-driving car, electric vehicle. Think about what this takes. But on the other side, you need also to see you have a running business, you have an operations. What is it now what you can plug in and play? And it might not be that you really have an autonomous factory established next day. It might be more that, hey, I can use a certain element of robotics here. Let me process now documents in a smarter way. It's anyhow ridiculous why we still have so many paper invoices. I'm definitely not a big fan of that because it's getting created digitally. So why not also transferring the data, make the data available to ensure that you can process and automate certain activities. By the way, anyhow, no one wants really to do looking on the left screen or scan documents on the right screen, enter it, and then do this manually typing in information. This is what machines definitely can do better. So therefore, the use case, the value what technology can generate for companies is absolutely key, and is what I learn from all the conversations I have with clients, what we help them with at BCG to discuss this very, very openly. On the other side, what is it also what it means on the technology, what is needed? I think certain regulations are definitely needed to think about. These are standards, what you can apply and what you can use to be also secure in a certain framework. You can't come up with a self-driving car if basically the expectation is a car runs exactly like it is driven by a human being. And by the way, we see this. Germany has about 3,500 people dying, so basically 10 every day in traffic. Very unfortunate. But one thing you learn with that as well is we are humans. We are also not free of making mistakes. So therefore, this is also where we now need to define the right way. What is it what we trust? Where do we say, okay, that's okay that machines do that? And these are things where we basically don't allow to take autonomous decisions by machines. So therefore, I think it's a journey, it's a learning curve, like all the disruptive technologies and the evolution of humans, basically as it holds, the evolution of nature is. It's a kind of experiment. Sounds harsh and sounds a little bit weird, I know that, but basically when you look back, how certain species developed over the time, I think it's a good comparison also to see and take computers as an example. I mentioned the 286 I started with, get my first experience in. What the heck was it for a machine? Now I basically open my laptop, it runs for 6-7 hours. I can access the internet. I have unlimited access to tons of information I would never ever have dreamt of. And I couldn't learn at school. So this is basically also an evolutionary journey, what I see here, in where we need to learn the level of trust and also define it by the right regulatory requirements.
Well, I think what you're saying is to me makes totally sense because as an organization you cannot just start creating a fully automated organization from scratch. And the way I always say that I always compare AI to Lego. And as a kid, I used to play with Lego, and I love playing with Lego, and I think it's one of the most
Me too.
fantastic tools and toys that has been created by humans. And but it's very interesting to look at Lego because a Lego block has a very tiny fault tolerance when it's being created, so that it is compatible with every other Lego block that has ever been created. And it's up to your creativity and, of course, the funds that you have, how many Lego blocks you can buy, as to what you can build with that. When you start with Lego, you're not going to go build, the Titanic, which I think is the biggest Lego thing you can build from out of the box. But you start small and you start building and experimenting and growing from there. And once you grow and understand it, you can connect them to each other and slowly build something really cool. And I think that's the same thing applies to organizations. You want to create really narrow AI in a very narrow domain that is compatible to others, has a very small fault tolerance, but from there on you can then start to create a more automated organization.
I couldn't agree more, Mark, and I love your example. First of all, we share the same passion. I was a big fan of Lego, and then Lego Technics came up with all the machines what you could build. But isn't it amazing? What is it what we bought, or basically our parents bought for us? It was based on a desire of a picture on the box. At least this is how I see it. And I see, oh wow, a racing car, something amazing, or a construction machine. I was totally in for that. When you open the box, we all know what we got. Tons of tiny pieces. And this is really also where it shows, oh wow, what shall I do now? And I remember looking in the manual, because without the manual you are more or less lost. At least this is what I experienced. And then you build something. And this is also a little bit about how you can see technology or artificial intelligence. Let's say the algorithms are the Lego pieces, and what you do out of that is basically the picture, what you can draft. But here it comes. There are two elements in, and we might have experienced the same. When you have done something in Lego, and probably you have also stones left from other things what you experience, and you started probably playing around and put another item on a ship like the Titanic, or something you have built, or you have enhanced something, you have changed the structure because you simply could do it. And sometimes you enjoyed it, sometimes it was, it looks not so nice, and you started again or did something different. This is very good as comparison. I love your example that an algorithm is testing these things out by itself in defined boundaries. But basically, then it is also some stuff, wow, really good. That's an enhancement. This is then where you come up with like what Google I/O did with a chatbot which can do basically automatically to get you an appointment from at a hairdresser. It was really a great conversation. Even include, oh, wait a moment, I have to look it up, and the machine was saying, So basically, something which is very human and not typical for a machine. Something you see, wow, you can do something great. On the other side, you might see, oh, wow, it is not working in the way, it is not coming out with the expected result. And then someone needs to stop it. And this is exactly where the human intelligence comes in, where you say, no, this is going in the wrong direction. You mentioned racism as one example. Yes, I couldn't agree more. This is the wrong direction. We need to stop it. And basically, we need to teach the algorithm, okay, don't do it. The information you have here, process it in a way that we really benefit from that. Brilliant example, Mark. I love it.
Marcell, I feel like oftentimes what governments are doing to rein in how AI can be used in usually for the benefit of the public is a trailing indicator of what we as individuals feel. It often feels like we're educating the government so that they can regulate back to us. And one of the issues that we've wrestled with on this podcast is that oftentimes these regulations are enforced inconsistently across central governing bodies, local, regional, etc. In your work with large corporations, do you feel like corporations can be trusted to be responsible with how they deploy AI? Or if or how or what should the role be of governments to enforce these regulations on the corporations that ultimately affect us as citizens?
Then I think before you start thinking about the regulation, you start mostly with the innovation. So I think the innovation needs to come first. If no one would have started experimenting and coming up with the wheel, and then we all know how evolution goes. Basically, the innovation needs to be first. But then we see, oh wow, the wheel, and then later on we got horses, we got a carriage. Then what is it? What we wanted? Faster horses. We know. Technology proved us that there's a smarter way doing that, coming up with the automotive. But basically, just having automotives and horses around at the same street might be tricky over time. So therefore, regulation kicked in. And this is also, I'm using this historical example for a purpose, because you ask about what is needed and what is it what on the regulatory side is happening, and can we trust companies? I think we need to trust companies at the beginning to come up with these innovations and give a certain freedom to innovate. From the ideation, just brainstorming, and then to an innovation, something you might use and can transfer to a product. But then we see, oh wow, it's probably not going in the right direction. And then I think it is exactly where we need to say, this is not entirely what we want. This is where it comes up now, even in the United States, where you see, oh, the power of social media. Companies like Google, Facebook, even Amazon, which is a different business, what they are doing, it is probably going in a direction we don't want to have it. And this is exactly also where companies think about what is it what they can use to benefit from that. So we need these innovations, but on the other side, we need also a framework based on our foundational values, and our values are changing. Our values are not the same like 100 years back. So we have an evolution on the values as well, because we know it is ridiculous thinking about that we are not using machines for our communication. So therefore, we need to provide the right regulation and technology based on what has been evolved, what is available in the market, and this might change in the future. So therefore, I think let's gives the freedom, and companies are discussing very actively what is it what we can use. I come back to my example. It needs to be a use case, a business case, and it needs to be something also probably a safe space to test it out. And then after that, think about, okay, this goes in the right direction, we can make a product out of it, it works, or this is something probably on the regulatory side we might not bring it and can develop it at scale.
I think I couldn't be I couldn't agree more. And I think the problem with putting regulations in law is that by the time it becomes a law, it's outdated, or because the technology is developing so fast, and we need to have regulation that is flexible. At the same time, we also need, of course, to have regulators who understand the technology, and they understand the impact of artificial intelligence, of recommendation engines, and how they affect society. And you just mentioned the social networks, which obviously now is very topical with the data leaks from Frances Hogan, the whistleblower from Facebook. How do you think that these insights, these revelations from her are impacting big tech in general, and Facebook more specifically? And will we as a society be able to regulate these kind of companies?
I think that's a great example on what we see at Facebook right now, where basically Facebook is kind of black box. It is the leading social media. I think more than 3.5 billion people using it on a monthly basis right now. So basically, this is half of the more than or almost half of the global population on Earth. On the other side, this black box, we don't have any clue. If I start my Facebook, I don't know what update do I get first? What is it really what I see? On what is it based? And also then, when I see how messages and information, sometimes also misinformation, are spreading fast, we see it is not entirely only positive. It is not just sharing updates from friends and then I have a network, because it is a different world now where social media are also business models. And this is something which is entirely different from what Mark Zuckerberg once started with, but basically having a Facebook, just a kind of catalog for the students at his university. Look what Facebook is now. 6 hours, 7 hours no Facebook was billions of losses what people had globally, because they have entirely business models based on Facebook, on Instagram, using WhatsApp to communicate. And this is also showing where, coming back to the evolutionary journey, what we see, where we need to start with some things and we see it's going now in this direction, and wow, suddenly Facebook is so powerful. We can't just leave it alone by basically regulated by one man, the founder and CEO of the company. It might need to be broadened and needs to be more regulated based on what we want. And the regulators, you mentioned that, Mark, I really like the idea, and I couldn't agree more. They need to learn too, because no one is an expert and born, at least in my age, is born with knowing all the technology advancements, and even I don't know what all exists on technology, because it is simply too much what we see out there. So therefore, we need also to accept regulators can only regulate after something happens. So it's always after the fact, and yes, it is running behind for a reason, because if it's running ahead, it would mean we stop this, or basically this is what we allow, this is what we forbid. And this is also where we need to be careful about. Probably we are limiting ourselves with what we have access to. And look now what we need. We see the climate change. We see CO2 emissions, the negative impact on that, global warming. So with that, we need to think also about, are there different technologies available? Can we do CO2 capturing? Can we use different technologies now by no longer having negative impact on our climate, to go not higher than the 1.5 degrees increase what we expect in the next decades? So this is really something also where we need to allow the room for ideation and innovation to really think about it before we come then later on with the regulation. And a good example in that is, what is the CO2 price in the future? EU is currently discussing it. It is an agreement between all the countries, part of the European Union, which need to define this is now what the price is. And with that, by the way, the supply chains, procurement will entirely change, because importing everything from China might be no longer the cheapest solution. It might be also, it makes sense to produce it in the Netherlands, to produce it in Poland, to produce it in Italy, because the CO2 price is regulating this, what also the overall cost for us as humans are, by looking at the CO2 emissions, what the long transportation will cost. So therefore, I think it's a mix between the innovation, which comes first, and then later on the regulations, which need to follow and need to define what we really want.
As a thought experiment, before we wrap up here, I'd love to get your perspective on this. So, the model today for who stores and can use your data is every single vendor in the world. If you give it to them, they can use it, misuse it, and as long as we're being delivered some value from the vendor, we let them store our data. Just as a thought experiment, is there an alternate model? What if instead there was some central repository of data and all the vendors had to purchase your data from something like a data market? Is there a paradigm that we haven't even considered when it comes to data storage and the kind of associated regulation of that data?
Then that's a great idea, and this might be something which is really an innovation by itself in the future. A little bit like in the Nordic countries, what we see, basically everyone has access to health data, because an emergency could happen, and in the case something happens to you, Mark, to you, Dan, or me, Marcell, it is easy to have access. But you get punished very hard if you abuse it, and you have an unallowed access. This could be probably something also thinking in a larger magnitude, having really a central repository for the data, and then only allowing certain elements of data to access based on the purpose, probably not regulating and limiting all the access, but basically punish hard in the way if someone is abusing the data. It might be a great closing thought on that, and definitely something worth considering. Great idea, Dan.
Well, I think that is indeed a great idea. It will be quite challenging, I think, to make it happen, because I remember that in the Netherlands, the electronic health records did not work out as you just discussed, because it's divided by like 15 different parties, and there are 15 different centralized electronic health records, so it's an absolute mess. So it doesn't really work out. But yeah, I think the idea is really good. We want to wrap it up here, Marcell. Thank you very much for joining us on the Between Two Bots podcast. Your insights, I think, are very, very relevant and very useful for organizations who want to start with AI to help them understand how they can do this in an ethical and responsible way. So very much for joining, for coming on to our podcast.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Dan. Highly appreciate the great questions and conversations. Thank you very much. Have a good one. Bye.
And
fascinating conversation.
And for everyone who's listening, if you enjoyed the conversation, feel free to like, subscribe, and listen to the other podcasts where we cover more on these topics. And we'll see you next time at the Between Two Bots podcast.